The following will contain spoilers for Dark Crystal Age of Resistance. Please watch that show before watching this.
Quiet. We don't want anyone else hear it. Plus, I took a big risk coming over here. Anyway, I decided Artemis should be left out of this topic because you know how he is. If he found out what I was doing, he'd flip his lid. I'm going to go over one of the scariest Skeksis of Dark Crystal Age of Resistance, and practically the most dangerous of all time.
Right!
Yeah, Cinnamon. Chamberlain.
Oh yes, ladies and gentlemen, I am talking about Skeksil the Chamberlain, the whimpering sycophant that people just love to hate. I had mentioned a couple of times in my previous videos of how much of a threat he can pose. In this video, I thought to discuss that a little further, and bear in mind there can be some spoilers. I feel like he's the ultimate Baddie through the Dark Crystal Age of Resistance, as well as Dark Crystal franchise through his intelligence, as well as that of his powerful influence throughout the entire series. Without further ado, let's begin. This character is one of the most memorable of the Skeksis. Very dangerous, and they don't make a joke about his cunning. According to one book, the Chamberlain is perhaps the most cerebral Skeksis, but also one of the most dangerous. He was able to convince Skektek to create a special machine made to specifically drain the Gelfling, thus creating a new life force. Now, realistically speaking, Skektek didn't exactly have that idea. It only occurred after this.
My, beloved scientist. You must be careful.
Of course, we technically know that Skeksil isn't only doing this because he's a good friend to Skektek. Actually, he's only doing it for his own ambitions. He pays attention to what goes on in others' heads and thinks of probable strategies to use. He knows how certain people tick and use that advantage against them. In this case with Skektek, he knew how desperate the scientist was, especially after overhearing the charming chat that scientist had with the Emperor. That's not the only thing that's a problem. If someone stood in his way, like Skekvar here, he would be no hesitant in trying to manipulate and use his brains to outwit against this guy, because he's not as strong as he was before. He managed to think of a clever strategy to win over the general's trust, and when that was no longer in use, well... That, in a lot of ways, is why Skeksil is practically the biggest baddie in Dark Crystal's Age of Resistance. He's extremely clever and plans everything out ahead. Not everything, and sometimes his plans do backfire, but he does know how to know how people tick and could come up with ways of trying to get everyone to bend to his will whenever the possibility comes. And if he had more time with this, he would probably be coming off as a very great manipulator and overthrow the Emperor, if not for Skekung. Not only is he very smart, but this guy has carved a huge path in the Dark Crystal franchise, as well as influenced the fate of his fellow Skeksis as well as that of the Gelfling. As you can see here, he was able to convince Skekmal, who wanted nothing to do with Gelflings, to go hunt down Rian, and how he was able to do it was pretty insanely strong on his part, thus resulting in Skekmal's death through the use of Urva.
Beautiful, sly, already bested scientist in myself. A Gelfling that can stand before Skeksis and escape with life is no ordinary prey, yeah? Say more.
So yeah, if you think about it, in a lot of ways, he was a major influence in the Dark Crystal, mostly because of the fact of what he had done with his influence. He was able to convince Skekmal to do a permanent hunting, which resulted into his death. And also, Skeksil has been responsible, directly and indirectly, of other deaths as well. After all, he was the one who thought of trying to send the Gelflings to their doom by trying to drain their essence, as well as the fact that he killed Skekvar as well as Skeklak by encouraging the Emperor to use the Darkening more often than he should, thus causing the Emperor to try to become more desperate and greedy than he already was at the beginning of the series. If he hadn't tried to flash his power around, I think the Emperor would have realized sooner of what Skeksil was doing. And of course, poor Skektek was also killed by this guy. If he didn't follow through with what Skeksil suggested, he probably wouldn't have to be losing an eye, as well as having to deal with having to die later on. And of course, he tried to convince Rian to start a war with the others. I mean, not literally speaking, but he tried to convince Rian to stop a war before it would start. But in some ways, because he forced them to suck Mira's essence out, it still started the war regardless of what he did. But still didn't change of how he wanted Rian to stop the rebellion by using guilt. So anyway, with this series, I feel like Skeksil is one of the most terrifying villains imaginable. Though he doesn't have the brute strength, he does have a lot of cunning and knows of how to make people dance to his will, and has a large influence with the history, which is probably one of the things that makes such an effective villain. So, what do you guys think? Do you feel like Skeksil is one of the scariest of all? Leave a comment below, subscribe, and do a like.
So, are we here just to make sure Skeksil doesn't follow us?
Actually, yeah. Skeksil is basically Ursul's darker half, so being in this forest is a lot safer for the rest of us, that's for sure. Hey, who wants a campfire story?